It is nearly 2025, and that means another year of a lot of change and opportunity and money to be made. Now, I have nothing to sell you and no personal stake in this, but in this video, I will give you my 2 cents on the best online side hustles for 2025 given 4 criteria. So first, a lack of saturation has to be a constant, so you won't have heard of many of these. And then for the rest, I'm going to rate them out of 10, and that will be ease, stability, and scale. Now, ease just refers to how relatively or comparatively easy it is for you to get into a position to succeed at this business or model, right? As in, for example, if I said, hey, semiconductors are a great business, well, pragmatically, you can't go and raise $1 billion and go start that type of business. Then stability speaks to how volatile intrinsically or kind of risky this business is. For example, in some businesses, you can retain a client base fairly easily, while for others, they are just intrinsically going to be risky, and there's a lot of new entrants in the market, and the market may not exist in a few years. And maybe there's more money to be made upfront in those types of businesses, but that still is really something to be considered as far as these models go. And then the third element is scale. So that's, well, if you stick with this, what kind of scale can you expect to see, right? In some businesses, if you validate the core proposition, if you validate the core demand for a certain product, then it's really just a function of scaling to the moon, right? For others, maybe it's more niche, it's geographically constrained, and long-term, maybe it's easier to get a foothold, but it's harder to grow it into, say, a public company, if that's what you want, instead of just, say, I want to make $100,000 a year, $1 million a year, or whatever it is for a kind of lifestyle business. I will also get into a few generalized approaches for 2025 based on this year and just the last few years and what we've seen for a lot of the online spacey business models. And finally, I will end it with do nots. So we'll cover what to do and also just here's absolutely what to avoid just looking at the data. And on that note, the online side hustle for 2025, number 1 is self-publishing. I won't go into a whole spiel on this because you do have that 3-hour video on the subject, but I was in the self-publishing space for 7 years and sold that business recently, and no one has heard of it, and everyone who, or at least most people who have heard of it, associate it with this incredibly difficult thing where you cannot personally be an author or succeed in that whole kind of writing literary space. Or other people view it as, oh, I'm going to create and just pump out like low content books that are just journals or whatnot and throw 10,000 up there and make a bunch of money. I don't think either of those are correct. What I do really like about self-publishing is twofold. First, it's extremely stable in that once you have a book that is doing well and ranking in a certain subject on certain platforms, it is overwhelmingly likely to continue to generate sales passively, and I use that with asterisks, for years to come. And when I say passively there, I mean the effort is really just distributed unequally. So you're putting a lot of effort in upfront, but once you have the system, once you have a set of good books, they're going to make money for a long time on the tail end there. And the second thing I like about it, again, is that saturation aspect where nearly no one has heard of self-publishing. And for those even who are familiar with or kind of involved in the online digital space or the digital nomad space, a lot of people still don't associate self-publishing with a viable business model for laymen or people who don't want to write their own books. So go watch the 3-hour video if you are interested in it, but otherwise let's get to number 2. So number 2 is AI dropshipping, and I say this very specifically with AI dropshipping, not dropshipping generally. And there's a tool that I will come back to in a second here, but what it really comes down to and what I generally look for in successful models or just successful individuals is their ability to test and iterate rapidly. It's just that general concept of you're not likely to strike gold the first time, but if you can keep getting closer to gold over time consistently, just the pure reps involved there and your ability to improve each time you commit to a new rep, that long run just probabilistically is going to put you in a better place. So right now I'm going to log on to this website and create a fully optimized dropshipping store with AI in just literally a few minutes. So right now I'm going to the Build Your Store website, clicking build my free store and then signing in. I can then choose the category or the niche that I want for the store, and then pick the banner design for the homepage. And what we're doing now is connecting the Shopify account, which we're going to set up here to BYS. So you can see I'm starting the free trial, signing in, and then I'm going through a few more quick steps here to make sure that we can connect our Shopify store and the free trial there with then BYS and this software, which will create that store with the products for us. So that's created now, and then I'm going to go through, like I said, a few more of the quick steps here, and then I'll show you what the finalized store once created looks like just after we finish these steps and get started with the store itself. So here we go on that. This is the finished, raw, totally uncustomized store with the products and different pages. So this is what you can expect if you try out Build Your Store for AI dropshipping as well. And the tool I just used called Build Your Store, I think, is the best way to get into AI dropshipping. Just hear me out. It gives you a completely free, and I'll say that again, completely free Shopify dropshipping store that's designed and created using AI on pre-existing optimized products. And by setup, I mean that is a fully created website business with those products and with fully fleshed out, completed pages. That saves you a ridiculous amount of headache and effort that is normally associated with getting stores up and running. And like I said, that lets you test different ideas and concepts and products very, very fast. You just choose your niche, you review your store that has been prepared, and then you can customize whatever you want if you don't like anything. So this way, if you want to just test 10 products, if you're an ad guy, now you can do that in 20 minutes, right, through these 10 different, websites. Like I said, it's totally free to build your store, so at least just have fun and check it out. And you can do that at buildyourstore.ai/John-Law. Again, that is buildyourstore.ai/John-Law, or just go to the top link in the description to get started with this winning side hustle for 2025 today. I'm going to cover 3 more and then I will head into the office. So you've all heard of the agency concept probably, which is essentially just freelancing but offering some kind of service to some kind of business, kind of B2B clientele. Now, an agency model is great in that it gets you familiar with a lot of different aspects of business because you have to figure out an offer, you have to do the sales yourself, and then figure out fulfillment as well. I think a lot of people fail here in that they try to outsource or delegate everything, and I'll speak to this later, but that is absolutely not what you want to do if you're just starting out. You want to get good, you want to get really good at one very specific thing, because that is the monetizable skill that carries you through that business and anything else in a career sense that you will do in your future. Now, going into 2025, if you look at the last few years, what you've seen is a lot of the core agency models get entirely commoditized. And by that, I mean people like Eamon and all the influencers that are selling the courses, right? They have preached these same, say, 10 agency models. So then all the laymen who get into this just go and replicate those kind of 10 models. So my advice is ignore those 10 core repeatable agency models that everyone is doing. And what I would recommend for 2025 is much more of a done-for-you consulting approach. So this is not a monthly retainer, and that's a lot less attractive than I think a lot of people make it out to be. Rather, I'd say just have something of value, some system, some set of automations, whatever it may be, and then just pick people on a one-time sale for that. If you can fully guarantee that, for example, they buy it, and then if they don't like it after 30 days, if they don't see results, then they refund you, do that. But I think generally, if you approach it in that way, you can charge more. It's easier to get case studies depending on how you package it. And so very specifically, not charging a subscription, but a one-time, very niche offer, especially in an outdated industry or an industry dealing in big bucks, which I will talk on in a few minutes, is what I would recommend as far as that model goes for 2025. Now for publishing, I would rate that a 5 for ease out of 10, a 9 as far as stability goes, and then a 3 as far as scale goes. And that's because publishing is very stable, but it's also something that grows kind of over time, and there is kind of a long curve before you really start to see those exponential results. Once you have a few books doing well, they'll fund more development and so on. Now for agency, I would give it a 4 out of 10 for ease. Again, 10 is the easiest, and that's because it is easy by technicality to do the things involved in it. But that's a very different game from being able to do those things at a level where you're actually going to get clients and or critically get results for said clients. And then I'll give it a 4 for stability, in that you do typically see a lot of churn, but it does depend on what you're selling and what you're doing. And then a 6 for scale, in that typically if you do have a offer that is winning, that is doing really well, you can just scale that to the entire industry. That's number 3. Now, number 4 plays off kind of indie hacking, and I covered this just actually a few videos ago in a programmatic SEO video where I kind of for 30 days just played around with a programmatic SEO website. Now, I think a core trend that we're seeing going into 2025 is that programming, especially, and one's ability to create sophisticated machines that work on their own and code, right, has just gone through the roof. In that if you looked at people's ability to code and create, say, SaaS products, websites, etc., just 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago versus today, that's a radically different world. So I think a core trend there, or a core takeaway, is just incorporate more code into whatever you're doing, because you can just ask things to code for you now. And in that video, I specifically went over programmatic SEO, which somewhat ties into that, in that it's not directly code. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. But that's one of those very micro use case solutions oriented model where if it sticks, it's really just a data problem, and then you can just scale to the moon. And I think there is a lot of room, especially in that space, and that the term programmatic, right, is really just hasn't hit or hasn't stuck compared to general SEO. You may think I'm beating a dead horse here, and that I did that video about it, I'm mentioning it in this one, but that's just because genuinely I've tried it and it's gone pretty well compared to a lot of other models that are a lot slower to kind of kick off. So you can watch that video if you want to understand at a greater depth what exactly that is. Now I'm actually going to preemptively sneak a do not model in at this point, and this is going to be controversial, but I think you should not get into content in 2025. And by that, I mean just anything social media related. And I rest my case on the following. So most people, if you want to get into a side hustle that's online in 2025 or beyond, or this year, or whenever, right, you're probably looking for a few key things. One of those is location freedom. The second is just financial results, right? You want to make money. And then the third is you want to enjoy what you're doing and the process of it. So let's think about how social media compares to those 3 legs. First, the actual process of creating content typically isn't fun or enjoyed by most people, right? If you think about creating videos, speaking to a camera, editing, right, the distribution, it may seem fun, it may look fun on the outside. Most people, when they try and actually do it, they just don't enjoy it. Now, if you love it, if you love content, if you love anything, right, just go and do that and don't worry about it. But as far as feeling forced to go into it, I think you absolutely should not feel that, despite this trend that we're seeing among Gen Zers, among just young people generally in pursuing content and being an influencer. Second, if we think about monetization, really it does not pay that well for nearly everyone that's involved in content. And really just if your goal is to make a minimum threshold of money you needed to give you location freedom, the probability that you get that through content faster than you would through 50 other things I can list is near zero, just based off what I've seen from a lot of people doing it. You can make really good money with content, right? Like I make a few grand per video in sponsorships plus ad revenue. That adds up to a pretty considerable sum over the course of months or years in managing this channel. But this is not what I do to actually generate funds. This is not my day job equivalent, right? And I'm able to put a degree of resources in this that were only allowed by what I was actually doing not from doing social media full time. I also started this, 8 or 9 years ago now, as far as the early videos and content goes. So it's been a long time in the making. And so I will give content location freedom in that you can generally work from anywhere if you produce content, and that's great. And again, if you love it, go and do it. But as far as those other two things goes, as in just the process of it and then just your ability to monetize, it's not really what you want to be doing just if you look at the data. And I know so many people that feel pulled into it and so want to do it for that reasons. If that's you, I'd say don't worry about it going into this next year. And that said, I will see you in the office. So I'm back in the office now, and I did just film a video about economic concepts that I find super interesting that I think people don't associate with economics. Like I was just talking about what's called the Dutch disease. That is this thing that countries go through where if they find a natural resource that makes them a lot of money, it's actually really bad for the economy. So just interesting things like that. And I think that video should have come out a few days before you're seeing this one. But that said, I do want to get back into another few concepts, another few models that are, I think, the best side hustles for 2025. So these next two are models that I've seen friends of mine do really well with that I still think are very unsaturated, at least in the way you can do them going into 2025. And there's so much attention now on online side hustles, so to speak, that I think it is these little unsaturated gold mines where no one's thinking about them, no one's paying attention that you want to think about. And the first of those is curb painting, which sounds strange, and by that I mean the little house numbers that are painted onto curbs in a lot of places. And the first of those models is curb painting, which sounds strange, and by that I mean the little house numbers that are painted on curbs in a lot of cities. This doesn't work everywhere, but there's a friend of mine that got into curb painting as a business in early high school as a way of just generating cash. And what he would do is he bought these stencils for curb painting, and I'll show you pictures on the screen, and then spray paint. And then he'd just go door to door and say, hey, can I paint your curb? Because he can go and he can see, okay, this person's number is old or doesn't show anymore. So then he says, well, okay, here's your problem. I can see it. Everyone can see it. The very simple pitch there is, well, firefighters need to see it. It's a safety hazard, and it'll look better if it's new. And I just did it for your neighbors. Can I do it for you? And it takes them maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes max per house and per curb number, most of which is just the paint drying. And he'd charge $25 or $50 per curb. So when you think about the average wage, right, of maybe $20 an hour, if you're lucky in a lot of parts in the country, of the US, if not the world, right, this guy's pulling in $100, $200, $300 an hour in cash on a very low effort, low skill thing. And by that, I mean the sales part is hard. I wouldn't call that low skill or just getting out there and hustling, but the actual fulfillment is just putting a stencil on and painting over that with your spray paint. So this right here is a list of items that you need to start curb painting, and it's as easy as just going door to door, knocking and getting comfortable with sales, and then just starting to get those numbers done. It's a really great way of generating cash very quickly, and a lot of cash at that, and it ties into a kind of extension of curb painting, which is reselling. And that's how I got my start in anything related to making money. In that when I was in early middle school, I wanted cash and I didn't know how to get it. So what I started doing is just going to garage sales around my town and thrift stores as well, and finding items that people were selling and then just reselling them on apps like Nextdoor or also just eBay. And I didn't make a ton of money, but I was starting from scratch. I had no money and I was spending $5, $10, $20 there at garage sales and then flipping things for a stable profit. I got up to a peak of about $1,000 a month in profit, which in middle school isn't bad, right? It's not making a ridiculous amount of money, but if you're starting from nothing, that is another very low skill, as in you don't need to be incredible at negotiating or anything. It's really just, can you hustle? And reselling. Now, that is not an online side hustle, neither is curb painting, but I do want to include them in this video, and that I think people discount some of those physical hustles because so many people are doing things online that if you can be the person that does things in person in the real world and actually can talk to people and can work with people physically, you're going to have this massive edge up over people purely doing Memecoins, e-commerce, right? Whatever it may be online. Now, the second model that I want to touch on actually comes from a roommate of mine in my freshman year of university. He was trying to figure out what he wanted to do for an internship the first summer after his freshman year. And he looked at what he used all the time and what he was good at, and he said, hey, it's ChatGPT, it's Claude, it's all these chatbots and using them to make me more productive. So then he was thinking, well, a lot of companies out there are still figuring out how to use these tools most productively for their employees and for their business and to automate things. And, in my agency and a lot of the marketing work that we do, there's a lot of work around, say, Zapier, around Make.com, and just automating very little things with ChatGPT, with Claude, with these other bots that a lot of businesses aren't doing or even thinking about. So what Trishan did is he went and talked to people who owned companies, and he said, hey, this is what I love to do and what I'm good at, and I want to consult for you and figure out and work with your company and your employees how AI can be used most productively and most profitably at your company. And I think this is interesting because it reverses that dynamic of being young being a bad thing, because this AI stuff is associated with being young. So he's this college freshman out there, but people trust him because that's exactly who is most associated with technology and especially these AI tools. And a lot of it wasn't extraordinarily complex work. It was just these basics of chatbots, of AI, and ways to utilize them better in a company. So I don't think this opportunity is going to be there in 2050 or whatnot. But as far as 2025 goes, I think we're seeing this massive rise, and I don't think it, I know it. We're seeing this massive rise in corporate and mainstream adoption of ChatGPT, but also we're starting to see these other tools getting used in automation. So if you can ride that wave, I think there's a lot of money to be made there, and you probably already, if you're younger, are familiar with these tools. Now, I'm going to get some dinner, and then I think we'll touch on my 2 core rules for online side hustles going into 2025. We're here in the financial district in San Francisco. You can see some buildings up there. And the first kind of rule, and by that I really mean doctrine or principle that you can generalize to apply to any number of businesses. And by that really I don't mean a business, I mean something that you know very well. So an industry that you work in, that you can make a business out of using this rule. And the first of those is that you got to look for industries that are outdated in the general trend of digitalization, and then look for ways in which you can automate boring or repetitive tasks. AI is a great, application for this means. There are a lot of other ways to do that as well. And the generalized concept there is that digitalization is this incredibly powerful force, and that's something that will continue in mass around the world for a very, very long time. And if you can take that theme of people will digitize boring tasks and automate them, which is financially powerful and a very easy sell if you can eliminate that pain point, then it's the question of what do you apply it to? And that's where you specifically come in. So if there's something that you specifically are good at or know very well or have worked in for a long time or want to work in, just be on the lookout for how can I digitize, automate, or eliminate this, just delete it from the workflow of you as an employee, if you as a business owner, or of your business generally. That has been the way to do things and one of the core value drivers in the world for the past 10 years, and it will continue to be so for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 plus years. Now that right there is one of the 2 kind of keys and industries that I look for and that I want to work in and start, dealing business in or selling to, right? The first of those was old traditional industries. So industries where they've been around for a long time, but people aren't familiar with technology or don't use technology in the same way, for example, social media or the content creation game would. So construction is primarily what I got into and what I've worked in for a long time in that sense. But the second one, apart from these traditional industries or just old industries, if you haven't been to that coffee brand as well, I think Blue Bottle, it's extremely effective, like decaffeine. So if you're a coffee lover, I recommend it. Now that second core demographic or type of industry, I got a little bit distracted there, is industries or people with a lot of money. So number one is old or outdated because there's just more room to grow, more low-hanging fruit there. And then number two is lots of money. And that's either lots of money individually as a person, or it's decisions that involve a lot of money. And the reason there is, as opposed to there being a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of, for example, a lot of the digitalizations that have worked in one industry have not been applied in another. Well, this is kind of the opposite in that you can very marginally impact a decision or deliver something which is, let's say, makes a 10% difference. But if you make a 10% or a 5% or a 1% difference or improvement in $1 billion process or decision, or for $1 billion individual, that's now worth a very, very large sum of money. And if you compare that to a lot of the side hustles in the online spaces in which you're selling something where you make $5 per, or you make a few $100 or even a few thousand per, right? If you can just really impact something, or marginally impact, or impact at all something as a rule that is really, really valuable, you're going to do really, really well there. Like, I think, for example, on the My First Million podcast, there was a guy telling a story of how he would sell data about ads or consulting data to people making decisions about private equity investments or buyouts. And because those are $500 million, $1 billion, even just $50 million decisions, then if he can make any kind of impact on the decision there, people are going to pay $100,000, $200,000, $1 million plus bucks for his service, because their propensity to, their willingness to consume, their elasticity to price is so low as far as elasticity goes, and so high as far as willingness goes. And with that said, a security guard is staring at me right now, so I am going to get back to my hotel. I did in fact just get kicked off a property there for filming, which is interesting. So those right there are my only two real generalized principles going into 2025, but trust me, they will treat you well. And that said, what I think is even just as important as what to do, so these generalized principles, is exactly what not to do. When you think about the online space and the online side hustle space, those are almost intrinsically correlated or related in the public mind to kind of scams or easy money or people just making money overnight. And that inherently is a problem. And for that reason, you see a lot of very, very bad advice and very, very bad side hustles and businesses and opportunities being advocated for in this space. So the following do nots are just my opinion, but they are also what the data says, and I try and generally just follow that as far as your probability of success goes. And that first do not is just anything which is extremely low effort or sounds like it's low effort or is pitched to you as being low effort. And by that I mean the game we're playing in the entrepreneurship, the business space, is really just, it comes down to money. And money is the liquid form of value that rules the world, in that anything and pretty much everything that people want has a price tag on it, which is an unfortunate truth. And even the things which you can't buy with money, you're better off getting with money than trying to get them without money. And the arguments against money because like it can't buy love, that's true, right? But in the modern world, unfortunately, it's very hard to have a healthy, happy relationship if you are dead broke, because then you have to go work for money all the time. So that's a tangent. But anyway, coming back to the point here, if money is the asset, the liquid form of value that everyone on earth is combating for constantly, it doesn't make sense logically that it's easy to get or that there is any entirely low effort opportunity out there. And people will say this hasn't been discovered yet, right? Or people don't know about it yet. But really, that doesn't hold in nearly all cases, and most inefficiencies in the market or most easy money opportunities are going to be arbitraged out just like that. My argument to you is if you approach those things with the mindset that, well, I'm going to do them because they're easy money, or someone said it's easy money, so I should therefore do it, you are so much worse off than if you approach those same opportunities with the mindset of depth is going to beat breadth. And what that means basically is just, well, if you get really good at something or a lot of things, that's how you win. And if you couple being really good at something with an opportunity or an easy money type thing, well, that's a situation that favors you. That's not to say it's guaranteed, because nothing is, but versus the two cases of a really difficult industry to crack, even if you're good at it, and then also just easy money, no effort, you're gonna win, and you don't want to put effort in because you feel like it's easy money, that middle ground of, hey, approach it with effort and depth in mind, that is how you win. So for 2025, avoid anything that people are pitching, or at least don't approach it like this, where easy money is the goal and where it's extremely easy to get. Now, number 2 in do nots is Memecoins. And this is probably the most visceral example of easy money, in that you can make an extreme amount of money in Memecoins. And I've spent a lot of time in crypto myself. I've written 3 books on crypto. So I perhaps am to some degree a hypocrite in saying, well, don't at all pursue or be open to something like Memecoins. But the way that Memecoins are pitched to people, and this is what I was just going into, is easy money, you put no effort in, and you win, you get rich. So if you are going to get into something as volatile and inherently risky as, for example, Memecoins, you need to research 24/7, you need to get really good at it, and then have a doctrine, have an approach, and change that approach if you need to over time. And eventually, if that investment thesis is sound, you will do really well. But what everyone does when they hear Memecoins is they Google some coin, they hear from a friend, they put some money in, they lose all of it, right? And 99% of Memecoin investors lose money. So therefore, I'm gonna say, never do it, just like I'm gonna say never do it about a bunch of things which you shouldn't do if you're not gonna put any effort into it. And also, even if you just look at the odds, right, Memecoins are an incredibly bad bet. Like, just go to Vegas at that point. Okay, now my third do not here very specifically is copywriting. And the reason I say that is because it's an extremely commoditized asset in that the skill of, for example, writing well is so general. It's like the term business, right? Where people say, I do business. Well, what do you actually do, right? Because it's such a general descriptor. And I think the same applies as far as a lot of the online models goes to something like copy, because copy is in everything. It's in branding, it's in marketing, it's in sales, it's in writing emails to friends, it's in the text messages you send to your romantic partner. Like, that may be the cynic in me, but the skill of writing, speaking, communicating, and convincing is everything. And so if you try and market that as a general skill, if you try and go and say, I will write good copy for you, you're gonna fail off the bat, because the people who are more niche than you or who have just been in the game for longer than you are gonna get all that business. And this applies to pretty much every agency model. I just think copywriting is a kind of very visceral example where a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to start a copy agency or a copy business and I'm going to write better copy and people are going to make money. And then they go and try and sell that and pitch it to people and they just fall flat on their faces. So if you are going to get into something like copy, right, pick a very specific niche, pick very actionable results. For example, I am the guy that writes the conversion increasing copy for doctors' offices. And then you go and you work for 3 doctors' offices where you say, here's the system I use to test and increase conversions through changing the headlines and descriptions in your Google Ads. You do it 3 times for free, you get the results that you get, and then you go and pitch that to very specifically doctors' offices. And that, as an approach, is very different from just, okay, I'm starting a copy business and I'm going to go pitch people on, I'm going to make your copy better. And that is the third do not.